While we on Earth are discussing Artemis 2, Starship V3, and the next moon landing 225 million kilometers away from us, there's a collection of robots. Some are still driving, some are still taking pictures, and some have been dead for years. And some of them have made discoveries that have fundamentally changed our view of the solar system, yet have almost gone unnoticed by the public. Today we're doing a status check. Which robots are operating on Mars in May 2026? What have they found? Who has given up? And above all, will we ever bring the most important samples ever collected on another planet back to Earth? My name is Serwin, and this is Mars Chronicles. Let's start with living beings. In May 2026, exactly 2 active robots are operating on the surface of Mars. Both come from the USA, are nuclear-powered, and have far exceeded their original missions. Curiosity landed in Gale Crater on August 6, 2012. The rover has been operating for 4,877 sols. That's what Martian days are called, so that's nearly 14 Earth years. In operation. By now, the rover should be right in the middle of puberty. The mission was planned to last 687 days, 1 Martian year. That turned into more than 20 Martian years. During this time, Curiosity has traveled about 36.86 kilometers and climbed over 740 meters in elevation. Since 2014, he has been climbing Mount Sharp, a 5-kilometer high layered mountain in the center of Gale Crater. Why a mountain? That's the clever idea. Mount Sharp is basically a vertical history book. The lowest layers are the oldest, the top ones are the youngest. As Curiosity climbs up, it's traveling backward in time. And in each layer, it analyzes the chemical composition. This is how one of the most complete geological profiles we've ever had of another celestial body was created. But what has Curiosity really discovered so far? 3 things I would like to highlight. First, confirmed traces of liquid water. Not just ice. Not just minerals that were once in contact with water. Real sedimentary structures that only form when a lake has existed in one place for a long time. The Gale Crater was a lake, maybe for several hundred million years. Secondly, organic molecules. In April 2026, just a few weeks ago, the science team announced that a drill sample from 2020 contains the most diverse collection of organic molecules ever found on Mars. 21 carbon-containing molecules in total. 7 of them detected on Mars for the very first time. Among them are precursors for DNA building blocks. A benzene ring with an amino group and sulfur-containing benzothiophene. These molecules do not mean that life has been found. They mean that the building blocks from which life could be built are there. Third, methane. Second, pumpkin. Methane was detected in the atmosphere of Gale Crater, which fluctuates seasonally. Third, barely measurable during the day, suddenly present at night. This has been a scientific mystery for years. Methane can be produced by geological processes, but it can also be a metabolic product of microorganisms. We still don't know. Curiosity has now driven out of the so-called boxwork region, an area with net-like ridges that look like fossilized spider webs. These formed billions of years ago, when groundwater flowed through cracks in the rock and left behind minerals that hardened the stone. The current exploration is focused on a layer of salty sulfate minerals, an indicator of the phase when water on Mars evaporated. Speaking of rovers that are still active, a few days ago, the NASA Mars account posted a short video on X. Curiosity accidentally picked up a 13-kilogram rock while drilling a sample, which was now loosely hanging on the drill. Instead of complicated correction maneuvers, the team simply let the rover move the robotic arm and vibrate the drill until the rock fell off. A 24-second video showing a rover shaking and a rock falling off. Mars research in May 2026 is sometimes exactly that. shaking a 14-year-old robot on a planet 225 million kilometers away until an annoying chunk of rock finally comes off. And it works! The second active robot is Perseverance, which landed on February 18, 2021 in Jezero crater, exactly where a river flowed into a lake 3.5 billion years ago. The technical term for this is a river delta. This spot was not chosen by chance. A river delta is one of the best places on Earth to preserve biological traces. Perseverance has only covered about 40 kilometers so far. That puts it just ahead of Curiosity, even though it has been in operation for 5 fewer years. That has to do with design. Perseverance's wheels are larger and have twice as many ribs as those of its predecessor. NASA learned from Curiosity's battered wheels, and Perseverance drives faster, smarter, and now even autonomously. In February 2026, a software update called Mars Global Localization was released. Until then, Perseverance navigated like a ship in the 18th century, through dead reckoning, counting wheel rotations, comparing terrain images, and calculating an estimate of the position from that. The new system compares panoramic images directly with high-resolution orbital maps on board and determines the position to about 25 centimeters accuracy in 2 minutes, without help from Earth. And in December 2025, Perseverance traveled a route for the first time that was completely planned by artificial intelligence. 210 meters on December 8th, 246 meters 2 days later. The system uses so-called vision language models and is a collaboration between the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or JPL, and Anthropic. Exactly, the company behind Claude. The distance between the two applications is absurd, but absolutely fascinating. What did Perseverance find that made the effort worthwhile now? 3 things. First, Chiawa Falls, a rock discovered in 2024 with dark spots that scientists call leopard spots. On Earth, such patterns are created by chemical reactions caused by microorganisms. On Mars, they could mean the same thing, or they could be explained geologically. Currently, this question remains unanswered, and it is the most important open question in all of Mars research. Secondly, Perseverance is the first rover that not only measures, but also actively collects material and stores it in sealed titanium tubes. Some of these tubes are still on board, while others have been deliberately dropped at specific locations so that they can be collected by the Mars Sample Return mission and brought back to Earth. If these samples ever make it to Earth, we're talking about a scientific revolution. If not, they remain one of the most expensive promises in the history of space travel. From today's perspective, this mission is on very shaky ground. It's been cancelled and redesigned several times. Third, auroras. Perseverance captured the first visible auroras from the surface of another planet in 2025. And its microphones recorded electrical discharges in passing dust devils, a phenomenon that had previously only been theoretically postulated. Now for the bad news, or rather the not quite so clear-cut one. The third rover, which was still active until recently, is Zhurong. China's first Mars rover landed in May 2021 in the Utopia Planitia region, weighing 240 kilograms, equipped with 6 scientific instruments planned for 3 Martian months. Zhurong eventually operated for 358 Martian days and covered 1,921 meters. In May 2022, it went into hibernation as planned. It was supposed to wake up in December 2022. However, it did not wake up anymore. In April 2023, China officially confirmed that Zhurong most likely lost power due to excessive dust accumulation on its solar panels. Images from NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter show that the rover has not moved since September 2022. Officially, it has not been declared dead. Unofficially, no one is waiting for it to wake up again. China has learned from this experience. The next Chinese Mars mission won't be a conventional rover, but rather a sample return mission. We'll get to that in a moment. There's a rover we need to talk about that never made it to Mars, and, as of May 2026, is still sitting in a clean room at Airbus in Stevenage, England. Its name is Rosalind Franklin, named after the British chemist whose The X-ray data provided the crucial contribution to the discovery of the DNA structure, and who was long overlooked by history. Rosalind Franklin is the Mars mission of the European Space Agency ESA, planned together with Roscosmos as part of the ExoMars program. A rover with a drill that can penetrate 2 meters deep into the Martian rock. Deeper than any other rover has ever dug. Deep enough to get beneath the radiation and oxidation layer that destroys all organic material on the surface. Deep enough to find traces of life if any ever existed. This rover was supposed to launch in 2018, then 2020, then 2022. Then Russia invaded Ukraine. In March 2022, ESA ended its cooperation with Roscosmos. The Russian lander that was supposed to bring Rosalind Franklin to Mars was no longer available. The Russian radioisotope heater, meant to help the rover survive cold Martian nights, was no longer available. ESA basically had to adapt the rover to new hardware. In May 2024, a new contract was signed with the USA. NASA is providing the launch vehicle and the radioisotope heater. A new lander is being built. Launch is now planned for 2028. Arrival on Mars in 2030. Rosalind Franklin has thus become the oldest unmanned Mars mission in history, even before it has even launched. Over 10 years of delay, several billion euros in additional costs. But if this rover gets there one day and drills 2 meters into the rock, it could become the most important astrobiological tool we've ever brought to Mars. And while we're talking about the robots on the surface of Mars, we often forget that Mars' orbit itself has become one of the densest human-made spaces in the solar system. 8 active spacecraft are currently orbiting the red planet. 8 orbiters. The surface of Mars has now been mapped better than our own ocean floor. Let's start with the veteran. Mars Odyssey, launched in 2001 by NASA, has been in Mars orbit since October 2002. That makes it the oldest continuously operating probe at another planet ever. It maps Mars in the infrared range and also serves as a communications relay between the rovers on the surface and Earth. When Perseverance sends an image to Earth, it doesn't go directly. It usually goes through Odyssey or the next one on the list. Mars Express, the first planetary probe of the ESA, has been there since 2003. It has mapped Mars in stereo, measured the polar water ice, and discovered underground lakes beneath the South Pole. In the Rosalind Franklin crisis, Mars Express plays a small but important role as a communication bridge for the original mission. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, MRO, has been in orbit since 2006. It carries HiRISE, the highest resolution camera ever pointed at another planet. With it, rover tracks, lander positions, and geological structures are mapped at a resolution of about 30 centimeters per pixel. It was also HiRISE that provided us with the images that allowed us to confirm the standstill of the Chinese Zhurong rover. MAVEN, launched in 2014, studies the upper Martian atmosphere. The probe has delivered what is considered the most impressive Mars discovery of this decade. A detailed mechanism for how Mars lost its atmosphere to the solar wind. About 4 billion years ago, Mars lost its magnetic field and thus its protection from the solar wind, which has since been blowing the atmosphere away into space piece by piece. ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter, or TGO for short, has been in orbit since 2016 and was part of the ESA Roscosmos cooperation, which ended with the war in Ukraine. But TGO itself is still operating. It is specialized in searching for trace gases in the Martian atmosphere, particularly the mysterious methane that Curiosity measured on the surface. Then there are 3 new additions from the year 2021. The Al-Amal or Hope probe from the United Arab Emirates, the first Arab Mars orbiter. Tianwen-1, China's first Mars orbiter, which deployed its rover Zhurong and has since continued its scientific work in a highly elliptical orbit. Both are still active, And India was also involved. The Mars Orbiter mission, affectionately called Mangalyaan locally, has been in orbit since 2014 and made India the first nation to succeed on its first attempt at Mars. In April 2022, ISRO lost contact. So Mangalyaan is probably dead, but it's likely still orbiting Mars invisibly. Just like the NASA veteran Mars Global Surveyor, which hasn't worked since 2006 but will keep its orbit for decades to come. And currently approaching is the most exciting thing that was launched toward Mars in 2025. Escapade. A twin mission by NASA consisting of two identical probes built by Rocket Lab, operated by the University of California, Berkeley. Escapade launched on November 13, 2025 on New Glenn's second flight from Cape Canaveral. By the way, that was the flight where Blue Origin successfully landed a booster on the drone ship Jacqueline for the first time. A historic double success. The two Escapade probes are currently orbiting Lagrange Point 2, which is about 1.5 million kilometers behind the Earth. They are waiting there for a specific date. In November 2026, they will return to Earth, perform a flyby, and use our planet as a slingshot toward Mars. Arrival in September 2027. What they will do there is unique. For the first time in history, two coordinated spacecraft will enter the orbit of another planet at the same time. They are supposed to orbit Mars in a string of pearls formation, that is, flying one after another like a string of pearls through the same orbital region to measure temporal changes in the solar wind-Mars system. The same spot around Mars will be measured by two sensors, minutes apart. That has never happened before. If Escapade enters scientific operations as planned in 2028, then we will have 10 active spacecraft in Mars orbit. And that's a success story in its own right. While we on Earth talk about delays, cancelled missions, and unclear roadmaps, the constellation around Mars is denser than ever before. If this review grabs you as much as it does me, then hit the thanks button now, if you have it. If not, a like, subscription, or comment also helps the channel a lot. Thank you, and let's continue. Let's quickly review the robots that are no longer operating. But each and every one of them has made history. Sojourner, the first rolling robot on another planet. Landed in 1997 as part of the Mars Pathfinder mission. About the size of a stroller, planned for 7 days, but then ran for 83 days. Proved that you can actually drive on Mars. Today, it stands motionless in the Aris Vallis, probably long since half buried by sandstorms. Spirit and Opportunity, the twins. Landed in 2004 with a planned mission duration of 90 Mars days each. Spirit ran for 2,210 days and traveled 7.73 kilometers before getting stuck in a sandpit in 2010. Opportunity covered an incredible 1.6 kilometers, ran for 5,111 days, and was stopped by a global sandstorm in 2018. The last message from Opportunity, loosely translated, "My battery is drained and it's getting dark." A sentence that still brings tears to the eyes of many NASA engineers to this day. Truly a tragedy. This rover was supposed to operate for 90 days. It operated for 15 years. It had reached the Marathon Crater. A crater with exactly that name was chosen because it was about the distance of a marathon run from the landing site. These 4 rovers laid the foundation. Water has existed on Mars. For a long time, stable and in quantities that could have supported life. Stationary countries must not be left out of this list. 3 of them are particularly noteworthy: Viking 1 and Viking 2. The first to ever land in 1976, they conducted the first experiments to search for microbial life. The results were ambiguous, which still leads to discussions today. Some scientists argue that Viking detected life back then, but the result was dismissed because the models used to interpret it were inadequate. Phoenix, which landed near the Martian North Pole in 2008, was the first to directly confirm the existence of water ice in the Martian soil by digging it up and observing under the microscope how it sublimated in front of the camera. And InSight landed in 2018. The first lander that didn't study the surface, but the interior of Mars, with a seismometer that was sensitive enough to detect Marsquakes. InSight recorded over 1,300 quakes during its mission, including the strongest Marsquake measured so far on the 4th, May 2022, with a magnitude of 5. InSight's mission ended in December 2022, after dust on the solar panels also cut off its power supply. Its last photo, showing its dust-covered solar arm and the message "I probably won't have power for much longer," is one of the most moving images in the history of space exploration. And then there's Ingenuity. I'm not at all ashamed to admit that this little helicopter has really captivated me. My personal favorite on Mars? Write in the comments who your favorite is. The little drone that came with Perseverance. Planned for 5 test flights, it flew 72 times for 3 Martian years. The first drone ever to fly on another celestial body, it demonstrated that controlled flight on Mars is possible, with an atmospheric density that's only 1% of Earth's. In January 2024, a rotor blade broke during a landing and Ingenuity could no longer fly. But it still works as a stationary weather station and continues to communicate with Perseverance. I'm telling you, Ingenuity is lying there, damaged, lonely, and alone, and still providing data. What Ingenuity has made possible is enormous. The next generation of Mars helicopters will fly on board Space Reactor 1 Freedom as part of the Skyfall mission. 3 helicopters of the Ingenuity class. You can find out more in our video about Project Freedom, which is now linked below, of course. Now comes the uncomfortable part. Mars sample return. Perseverance has filled 33 sample tubes. He has a total of 38 with him. 10 tubes were left on the surface. The rest are still with Percy. Each of them contains material that could be analyzed on Earth with instruments that would never fit on a rover. We're talking about mass spectrometers that fill an entire room. We're talking about a single one of these samples being able to definitively determine in an Irish lab whether the leopard spots are biological or not. These samples are the most valuable things humanity has ever collected on another planet. And they're just lying there now, maybe forever. The story is complicated. Mars sample return was a joint mission by NASA and ESA. The following was planned. A lander with a small rocket on it launching in 2031. It collects samples, brings them into Mars orbit, where they are then picked up by a European orbiter and brought back to Earth in 2035. A 3-stage plan, 3 spacecraft, many billions of dollars. In April 2024, it became known that the costs had risen from the originally estimated 7 billion to now over 11 billion. And the schedule slipped into the 2040s. NASA commissioned 2 alternative architectures. A traditional one, NASA commissioned 2 alternative architectures. A traditional one with the proven sky crane, like with Curiosity and Perseverance, and a commercial one with a sample lander planned from SpaceX or Blue Origin. The samples were supposed to drop in mid-2026. In May 2025, the Trump administration proposed in its 2026 budget draft to cancel Mars sample return. The reasoning? Too expensive, and the purpose would be fulfilled by manned Mars missions anyway. Expensive anyway. In January 2026, Congress passed the final budget. The NASA budget was set at $24.4 billion. Significantly higher than what Trump had proposed. But Mars sample return, in its originally planned form, was cancelled. Effectively ended. That means specifically, the 33 tubes are still on Mars. The 10 tubes that were left behind in Jezero crater will probably never be retrieved. There is a new program called Mars Future Missions that might plan a return, but specifically nothing. No plan, no date, no architecture. The question is, Should we invest 11 billion in a project that's supposed to do something that will be done by human visitors in the future? And while that's happening, China is building. Tianwen-3, the Chinese sample return mission, is scheduled to launch in 2028. Return in 2031. Unlike the NASA architecture, Tianwen-3 will land at only one location and collect material only there. So the science is more limited compared to a rover-based approach that covers 30 different locations. But the likelihood that this mission will actually bring samples back to Earth is significantly higher. If Tianwen-3 is successful, then it's possible that the first Mars samples will be analyzed in Chinese laboratories, not in American or European ones. That is the more likely scenario. A former NASA chief commented on this scenario and, to paraphrase, that he couldn't imagine the only Mars samples ever returning solely via Chinese spacecraft. That was in 2024. At the beginning of 2026, this exact scenario is the most likely. There is another mission that plays a role in this game. In the fall of 2026, the Japanese mission MMX will launch, targeting Mars' moon Phobos. MMX is supposed to bring samples from the surface of Phobos back to Earth. If that succeeds, these would be the first samples from the Mars system that we would have in our hands, even if not from the surface of Mars itself. Let's pause for a moment and sort out what's actually heading to Mars in the coming years. The picture is more confusing than it was 10 years ago, and at the same time more crowded than ever before. First, in the short term, meaning in the next 2 years. The most important mission is the aforementioned MMX from Japan, planned for fall 2026. Phobos is a small potato-shaped chunk whose origin is still disputed to this day. Is it a captured asteroid or a piece of debris that was ejected when another body impacted Mars? MMX, like the Chinese sample return mission, is scheduled to be back on Earth in 2031. JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, has already completed 2 successful sample return missions from asteroids with Hayabusa 1 and Hayabusa 2, so they know how to do it. In the medium term, that is, between 2028 and 2033 missions are planned. First, Tianwen-3 China's sample return mission, launch in 2028, return in 2031. That would be a slap in the face to the Americans and Europeans. Second, Space Reactor 1 Freedom. The NASA mission with the first American nuclear reactor in space in 60 years. Launch in December 2028. Onboard Skyfall, the 3 next-generation helicopters. They are supposed to use their ground-penetrating radar to search for water ice beneath the surface of Mars and map potential human landing sites. Arrival on Mars in 2030. Third, Rosalind Franklin. ESA's long-delayed rover with the 2-meter drill launch in 2028, landing in 2030. And now, in the long term, so after 2030, this is where it gets speculative, but 3 things are emerging. First, manned SpaceX missions with Starship. In February 2026, SpaceX announced that it would postpone the Mars missions by 5 to 7 years and focus on the Moon. If Starship V3 works and orbital refueling is demonstrated, this delay could be shortened. Realistically, the first unmanned Starship Mars attempts will take place in the early 2030s. Manned, honestly, I don't see it happening before 2035. Secondly, a revived sample return mission in some form, whether under the name MSR or under a different umbrella. The scientific significance of the 33 tubes is too great for them to remain lying in the sand permanently. In any case, I hope that they will be recovered. Third, a competition between the USA and China over Mars. What we're currently observing on the Moon will be repeated on Mars, possibly with the roles reversed, if China manages to bring Mars samples to Earth by 2031 as the first power ever to do so. Now, to the honest question, what is the most likely scenario through 2031? Curiosity will probably continue to provide data for another 1 or 2 years. The radioisotope battery is slowly decaying, the wheels are getting weaker, and the distance it can drive each day is decreasing. But NASA taught the rover through a software optimization last year to put itself to sleep when it's done. That saves energy and further extends its lifespan. Secondly, Perseverance is in excellent condition according to JPL and will operate until at least 2031. With the new autonomous capabilities and the GPS update, it will cover significantly more distance than planned. The goal? To reach areas that are even older than the current samples. Singing Canyon is one of the next stops, a region with the oldest rock we know of. What also stands out is a pattern. JPL designs robots for a certain lifespan, and then it turns out that the design holds up for many times longer than originally intended. If only consumer products were as robust as NASA probes. Now we have to clarify a very important question. Can a manned Mars flight happen before a successful sample return mission? That's the idea that Trump hinted at in his budget proposal in May 2025. Robert Zubrin, probably the most prominent Mars advocate of all, thinks that's possible. But only if NASA, SpaceX, and the Trump administration agree on a plan that Zubrin himself considers realistic. He envisions a wave of robotic exploration probes in 2028, a larger robotic expedition in 2031, and a manned flight in 2033. Whether that's realistic is hard to say. SpaceX has postponed its Mars plans. NASA has cancelled Mars sample return. The first Artemis moon landing will probably be delayed. Anyone who says in 2026 that humans will be on Mars in 2033 is bold. But it's not pure fantasy either. It remains to be seen. Anyone who had said in 2003 that a private company would fly the largest launch vehicle in history in 2026 and catch the booster with robotic tower arms would have been laughed at or sent straight to the asylum. What remains after all that? 3 things. First, we have explored more of the surface of Mars than of any other planet except Earth. That is an achievement that is unique in human history. 4 rovers have traveled a total of over 130 kilometers on an alien planet. 3 landers have explored its interior. A drone has proven the possibility of flight on an alien world. Secondly, we have almost all the scientific indicators that point to past life, and not a single one that definitely proves it. Water, stable lakes for centuries, organic molecules, methane fluctuations, leopard-like structures. Everything is there, but none of it is enough. Third, we have the answer. It lies in 33 sealed titanium tubes on a rover in the Jezero crater. The only question is who will retrieve it, and when, and if. A big thank you goes to Prusa. Without their support, this channel would look completely different. My name is Serwan, and this was Mars Chronicles. Thanks for tuning in. Per aspera ad astra. A 14-year-old robot. Robot. That has to do with design. Perseverance's wheels. NASA learned from Curiosity's battered wheels. NASA learned from Curiosity's battered wheels. Battered wheels. Learned from Curiosity's battered wheels. That's it.